Hey guys, got another update for you on the YJ. So, uh, past couple weeks I have been doing a good amount of work to it, mainly fixing that oil leak on the engine and putting a new exhaust on it. So, go over my exhaust. You can see it's got electric cutouts now. The downpipes actually fit with those Summit Racing manifolds, and they actually seal with a little graphite donut gasket. So, there's no more exhaust leak at the headers. The cutouts do unfortunately leak a little bit, but you'll get that with cutouts. And then you can see I got Flowmaster Flow Monsters. They're like cheap versions of like Super 40s or whatever that just come to axle dumps. Originally, I wanted to do tailpipes. I had even made up tailpipes that went in between the leaf spring and the frame and then came out to here, which looked really awesome. But then I made the exhaust system with the car in the air, the axle drooped, and then I put it on the ground, and the axle was about half an inch away from the exhaust pump. So I took it to test drive, and it would just mash the exhaust every time you went over a bump with any real speed. So I took those off. Eventually I might revisit that, but for now I'm kind of just digging it as is. What else? I got a new set of accessory gauges in there, Bosch this time. Those old gauges that I had in there were just like an extra set that my brother had, and ever since I put them in, the temp gauge wasn't really reading. It would take a real long time for it to actually show temperature, which I didn't believe, because I would take it for a short drive and pop the hood, and you could feel the upper rad hoses nice and hot, but it wasn't showing anything on the gauge, and I really didn't like that. So I put that set of gauges in there. Now they actually have backlighting, so when I'm driving at night I can actually see the gauges instead of having to whip out my phone and turn on the flashlight. The cutouts that I got are Jegs cutouts. They sell them as like a multi-item kit thing where it comes with the actual cutout pipes and then the motors separately. So I just made these cutout tips out of the old exhaust tips that were on this Jeep. With the old exhaust setup, I just cut the tips off, and then the cutouts actually come with the pipe actually comes with 4 3-bolt flanges. I guess that's meant for like being able to bolt the cutout pipe on so that you could take the cutout pipe out, but I just welded the cutout pipe in, so I just have 4 flanges now. So I use 2 of them to make these tips. I specifically wanted these Jegs cutouts because they were really cheap for electric cutouts. I think for the pair they're like $200, which is a good bit cheaper than like the Summit Racing brand ones. And B, something different about these compared to a lot of the other cheapy ones is these are 2 cutouts that go into 1 switch. A lot of them have 2 switches or one of those little stupid key fob things, and I hate those key fob things. So, and I didn't want to have to, press 2 switches at a time to, open the cutouts. These cutouts are also totally manual. there are some cutouts that operate off of like a timed electrical pulse, so you just hit the close button and then it'll send electrical signal to the motor for however many seconds to close the motor. But the problem with those is sometimes they don't fully close or fully open with that electrical signal. So I don't know if maybe you'd have to just like press the direction again or what, but I don't like that either. So these are just motors with a little wiring harness and a switch that conveniently goes directly in place of the switches for the hardtop on this thing. So that was pretty cool. I didn't have to make a custom bracket or anything, which would have I would have hated that. My big problem that I had with these cutouts though was when I first got them, I hooked them up as per the instructions, which weren't very in-depth. I mean, it was pretty much just, wire it to a Keon 12-volt power source, hook up the cutouts, and you're good to go. But, it says with cutouts, you're supposed to put them on with the valve open so that you have, you can make sure you have clearance for the valve to be open. So I did that. I put the cutouts on. I wired them up. And went to test them with the car off, and they opened and closed fully. So I was like, all right, I'll start the car, see how it sounds. Go to try and open the valve after I started the car, and they opened a hair and then stopped and then would not move. And I turned the car back off, and I went through. I was diagnosing these cutouts, troubleshooting them for probably 45 minutes. Doing all sorts of things like, they come with the cutouts have these little cheapo. I say little, but they're huge. These cheapo weather pack connectors that I went to clip them in, and they're so stiff that as soon as I clipped them in, the little locking tab broke off. So I was like, okay, well maybe it's an issue with that. So I cut the weather pack connector out, and I just hardwired the wires together, and that made absolutely no change. I was testing, like car off and moving the switch around. I could hear that the motor was kind of doing something, but I guess it just wasn't getting enough power to actually move. But you could hear it kind of like really trying to like barely sputter to life, where it was like it was you could hear that the motor was doing something, but it wasn't actually moving. I even tried getting a different switch because I thought the switch was bad, because when I put it together and I went to switch it on, I opened it and closed it and then felt a crunch in the switch, so I put another switch on. No change. I took the wires off and hooked the wires for the motor directly to a 12-volt battery, and that worked. But again, I shouldn't have to directly wire it to a battery to open it, and that doesn't help me when I actually have the car back together. So I called Jegs, and they were pretty decent about helping me figure it out, and I ended up just sending the cutouts back, and they sent these as a replacement, and I had to do absolutely nothing to these to get them to work. I just put them in. I mean, the weather pack connector still like exploded the second you actually connected them, so that's pretty much the only thing that I don't like about them, is that these connectors they use are really cheap. But overall I like the cutouts. Let me pause you guys. I'll fold my windshield back up and open the hood and show you under the hood. Alright, got you guys back. So as you can see right off the bat, I got my other intake put on. The previous Edelbrock Performer intake that I had on there would not stop leaking, And honestly, it could have been a multitude of things. You know, it could have been that I didn't have enough RTV on the China walls, or the distributor gasket wasn't good enough, or whatever. But I think the main thing was I did not have a correct PCV system hooked up on this thing. I really didn't have any PCV system hooked up, technically, because the way I had it set up before, like way before when I had the little bitty air cleaner on, which had the provisions for a PCV valve, was I had the port on the air cleaner going into the PCV valve, and then the breather. Well, that doesn't actually do anything, and I'm not saying that's any fault of anybody's but mine, because that's not how a PCV system works. The proper way to have your PCV system hooked up on a small box Chevy is on one valve cover you have your PCV valve that opens and closes based on vacuum. You have that going to either that little plug on the intake, or how I have it here with a Trans-Adapt carb spacer with a port on the back. You cannot hook your PCV valve to the same port as your brake booster. Like, you can't tee them together, because essentially all the PCV system is a controlled vacuum leak. So if you hook up, if you were to just like tee the line going to the brake booster and the line going to the PCV valve into the port on the back of the carburetor, you would have no power brakes, because you wouldn't have enough vacuum getting to the brake booster to be able to have power brakes. But basically, you need to have PCV valve on one side going into either the intake or the back of the carburetor, or a carb spacer, and then on the other valve cover you need either a breather or a valve, or just like a elbow with a hose going into your air cleaner. It's the same thing, it's just with the breather you don't need to have the hose or air cleaner with provisions for said hose. Because what you're doing is you're sucking air in through the breather into your crankcase, through the PCV valve, and into your intake. You're creating vacuum on the crankcase. You're ventilating the positive crankcase pressure, and having that vacuum means that the oil. If you don't have any vacuum on your crankcase, your oil is pretty much just gonna go wherever, go up into the pistons, into the combustion chamber, or in my case, my case was probably that, and out back through the intake and the distributor gasket, because if you're not, basically having the vacuum on the crankcase keeps the oil in the engine, if you want to think about it that way. It keeps the oil inside the engine. If you don't have a vacuum on your crankcase, the oil is going to try and seep out the path of least resistance, which is generally the distributor gasket or the China walls, or anywhere where it isn't a perfect sealed surface. But there's my yap session on the PCV system and how important it is. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. But I also got my thick aluminum valve covers on. Those cheap Chinese thin stamped steel valve covers were not it. They were starting to surface rust, and they were really sharp on the edges, and they were, the actual sealing surface was all warped. So, threw those in the scrap pile. Never gonna. I already have a set of them in our parts storage area from my Monte Carlo that I bought forever ago and never used for good reason. And then my last thing, I don't know if you can see, but on my alternator bracket there's a little chip there. Well, there's actually a chunk taken out of it in the shape of an M right where that bolt is, and then right under that bolt it split, so I had to weld it and you know, smooth it out. Somehow this alternator bracket's like all sorts of warped on this bolt surface, and you know, it cracked there. I don't understand how. It's really not like there's that much tension on the belt. Like I could press it in with my finger pretty easily, so I don't know. I mean, that's a Summit Racing brand alternator bracket, so I'm not really that surprised, but yeah, I would say overall Jeep's going pretty good. I still need to do the rear end work as far as cutting off the leaf spring perches and rewelding them, but I have no plans on doing that right now because of some other stuff that's going on with my daily driver. Little dispute with the dealership on that, but I'll get into that in another video if I feel like it. But basically, this is my only car that I'm driving at the moment. So yeah, I will see you guys in the next video. I'll update you the next time I do something major on it. But overall, I'm having a good time driving it yesterday and today, and I plan on driving it some more. So, see ya.